Welcome to this webinar on powering your organization's journey for 2021. It will focus on raising the funds your organization needs. I'm Mark Robison, Senior Consultant with Humane Network and co-host of the Shelter Success Simplified podcast. Our two presenters today are Bonnie Brown and Diane Blankenberg, founders of Humane Network. Humane Network is a nonprofit consulting organization that can help your organization with animal behavior training, development, operations, strategic planning, recruitment, and more. You can also outsource parts of your work to us, such as fundraising and communications. The first conversation with us is free with no obligation, so contact us at info@humanenetwork.org. You can find Bonnie and Diane's full bios on the Humane Network website and see the rest of our team there too. And you can ask questions at any time in the chat window at the bottom of the Zoom window. Just ask them as they come to mind and we will get to them at the end of the presentation. Now I will turn things over to Diane and Bonnie.
Thank you, Mark. So again, welcome to today's session. This is part one of our final topic, Power Your Journey, as Mark suggested. And I am Diane Blankenberg, the CEO of Humane Network.
And I'm Bonnie Brown, the president of Humane Network.
So today we're going to cover, as I mentioned, the first part of Power in Your Journey, and specifically looking at the things listed here. So looking at how to raise funds that your organization needs. So specifically identifying funding sources, creating a simple plan and its key components, and then some keys to successful fundraising around communications with your donors, events, and major gifts. And then next week will be our very last webinar, and it'll be part two of Power Your Journey, where we'll talk about increasing public engagement to support your fundraising efforts and fulfill your mission. So we're going to start right off with a poll. And the question is, how do you feel about your organization's fundraising efforts? We have a solid fundraising strategy. We do okay, but could do better. We struggle to raise funds, or not sure, not applicable. Okay, I actually can see the poll, Lori, so no problem on this end. And it looks like, interesting enough, but not surprising, is that there was 0 that said they have a solid fundraising strategy. But the good news is that 61% say we do okay, even though we could do better. And then 17% said we struggle. So this is actually pretty good. I'm not at all shocked that that you don't all have a really solid fundraising strategy, but hopefully this session today will help you be able to get there, and you can always contact us later if you need more personalized help. So I'm sure if I could have you all answer the questions, are you stressed about fundraising? Most of you would say yes, probably for 2 reasons. One is that you always need more of it, and the other is that it's not usually staff's or organization's favorite thing to do. But it is a skill that can be learned. And as we've said, if you've attended our past webinars, we've presented this quote quite a few times, and we'll continue to present it because it really sums up the concept really succinctly. Do good work, tell people about it, and ask them to help. So what we are here to do is to help you learn how to tell people about it and ask them to help. So think about your organization right now, and the best you know, how do you mostly raise your funds? So what is your organization's largest income source? Is it individual donations, fees for service, events, grants, other, not sure, or not applicable? So 43% said individual donations. So that is great. That's really good news, although there's still probably potential there, and we'll talk more about it in a minute. 0 said fees for service, 5% events, and 24% grants. So this is a chart showing how most nonprofit animal welfare groups are funded. That is for charitable funding, the sources of charitable funding. So as you can see, individual gifts is a huge piece of the pie. It's 78%. So even those of you that said, I believe it was 40-something% that said you're funding charitable funding came from individual gifts, you can see you still have more potential there. And I do want to comment here, as we may have some groups represented that are government funded, and hopefully you work with a friends of type group, and these kinds of suggestions that we're going to be presenting here can help you be more successful. And if you don't have a friends of group, feel free to reach out to us and we can help you with how you might be able to set something like that up in the future. So the first step is to really create a fundraising plan. We work with a lot of different organizations, and a lot of our focus is on helping them with their fundraising. But what I found is very few people have a documented plan. So you want to be sure that you are setting goals, you're developing a case for the support or a case for action. We'll talk about in a second, that you're targeting a variety of audiences. So don't get stuck on one type of audience, and sometimes using only one strategy ends up getting you stuck on one audience. So you want to use multiple strategies. Be sure you're always engaging your donors in a variety of ways, and you really need to dedicate the time and resources to fulfilling and implementing your plan. And of course, you always, with any plan, want to assess and adjust it and keep at it. So I mentioned earlier a case for support or a case for action. This is really important and something to keep in mind with all of your communications with your donors or potential donors. So it is a concise written statement that states why you exist, what is your mission, and what are your high-level goals that are compelling and engage people and make them want to participate and want to support the organization. And then obviously it needs to be really specific and inviting them to help. We are going to be providing a PDF of this presentation, as we had with all the others in the past. So won't necessarily go through every word that's on the slides, but I just wanted you to be able to see that here are some specifics about how to cultivate a variety of audiences, and also how to use a variety of strategies and what those might be. It's often, especially in current organizations that have younger staff, that they focus a lot on social media, sometimes overly so, and forget about the other methods. So you want to be sure that you're still doing some of those traditional methods, and we'll talk more about those later, so that you are reaching a variety of types of donors and supporters. So ultimately, fundraising is really all about relationships. And you need to be sure you're always keeping that in mind, no matter what decisions you're making and what plans you're making regarding your fundraising activities. So we're going to do another quick poll here. It says, how often do you communicate with your supporters? At least once a month, 4 or 5 times a year, less than 4 times a year, not sure, not applicable. All right, let's see. So the largest category is 41%, says at least once a month, 23% 4 or 5 times a year, less than 4 times a year, 9%. So obviously, the more the better, and we will provide you some key tips here on how to do that. And as I said earlier, we can also provide you some tailored advice if you want to reach out to us directly. So as we said, fundraising is really about relationships, and in order to build those relationships, you really need to communicate regularly. And it's still true that you need to be able to reach out to people many times before they're really going to I guess your communication is really going to have an impact. They used to say it 7 times, but as we see with our modern day, where we're bombarded by information and from a variety of sources all the time, sometimes it's even more than that. So you need to be sure that you're regularly communicating, and you want to be communicating with them not just to ask for money. So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, and we will be providing some additional information on that later. And I'm sure all of you know the importance of thank yous, but even though we may all know this, it's still a problem with a lot of organizations, either whether it's done at all or whether it's done timely or whether it's done personally. I know that I personally have received a variety of types of thank yous, and they aren't always personal. Sometimes there's errors, but you want to be sure that you are providing timely thank yous, no matter how small the gift or the donation. And it's been shown that donors who receive an extra thank you letter gave 60% larger gifts than those who did not. So there really is a direct return for your thank yous. So your contacts are your most valuable asset. And you need to be sure that you have all of your contact information in one place. It doesn't have to be a fancy place. It doesn't have to be an expensive database. You can use something as simple as Excel. You just want to be sure you gather everything into one place so you can easily access it and be able to reach out to the people. Be sure that you're not just including your past donors, but you're including volunteers. And if you do provide services, your service users, because those are obviously potential donors and supporters in the future. And as the note said here, volunteers are more than twice as likely to donate than non-volunteers. So just because they're already volunteering their time, that doesn't mean they won't also volunteer in a financial way. So don't hesitate to ask them also. And a lot of folks that we work with don't have much to start with on a mailing list. So we just encourage everybody to collect email addresses and physical addresses as much as you can wherever you go. So be sure you always have a list for people to sign up, whether you're tabling or it's at events, any kind of communication or interaction you have with any of the public. Be sure that you are collecting that information and adding it to whatever form where you're collecting it for the future and can easily access it. So always keep that in mind. Be sure your staff is always aware that they need to be collecting that information. And this will be a huge asset, and you will be able to grow your list over time. So now I'm going to turn it over to Bonnie Brown.
Thanks, Diane. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about why donors give. I imagine a lot of you know why, because it's the same reason in all likelihood that you got involved in the first place. Most people give because they feel moved emotionally. They are touched by your message, by the need for the animals. And even though, of course, there are still some donors who also like to see hard data and numbers, remember that most donors give because you have touched their heart and you've moved them to donate to your organization. So continuing on our theme of why donors give, it's a subtle difference, but it's important in terms of your messaging that people give to organizations not because the organization has needs, but because you're meeting needs in the community. And in our case, this means that you're helping animals, saving animals, providing needed care to animals. So you always want to keep the focus on the animals in your fundraising. And continuing on for why people give. People give because they are asked. And this is something you want to keep in mind when you're writing copy, whether it's something that's going to appear on Facebook or an email appeal to supporters or a mailed appeal to supporters. You always want to include an ask, and it's important to remember how important that is, because in the many things we're trying to accomplish in our fundraising communications, remembering to ask people, and of course in the right way, makes a huge difference. We love this quote: fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. So we want our supporters to be able to rejoice in our successes. And that's part of what we've been talking about as far as stories go and regular communication with people. So as you're doing your fundraising, you will need to make choices about the words that you use, and they can really have a huge impact. And there are some words that are especially impactful in terms of reaching donors. And we're going to talk about those now. And what I'd like to ask you to do is sort of put yourself in the headspace of a donor reading these messages that we have on the slide. And if you were a donor, which of them would be most likely to encourage you to give? So we're going to do this on a few different slides. We're going to share a pair of messages. And in this one, there's two. We save Freddie. Animals in need can count on us. Or thanks to your generosity, Freddie was rescued. So just think about it. Which of those would you rather see if you were being asked to give to an organization? So in this case, it's the one that includes the word you or your. Those words get a reader's attention, and this is always the case. But especially important when you're fundraising. So you want the focus to be on the donor and not on your organization. And it's really important to donors to know that they're making a difference. So you want to be sure that your messaging is conveying that. And one way to do that is to reference the donor. And we have a few other examples here of how you can use the word you or your in your communications with your supporters. So we have another pair of messages here for you. We're asking for your help now because Lola needs orthopedic surgery to repair her injured legs, or we're asking for your help, please donate. Now the last one has some benefits to it because it's concise, and we really do want to keep our messaging as concise as we can. But the first one talks about why. So let's see which is better. The word because is powerful, and research has shown that adding the reason why you are asking or why you need their support nearly doubles the success rate of appeals. So you want to be sure that all of your appeals to your supporters are clear requests. People need to know what they should do, in this case, donate, and why they should do it, in this case, because of the dog's injury. So we have another pair for you here. Please donate today so kittens like Toby can get the TLC they need. Or please donate so kittens like Toby can get the TLC they need. So you may have guessed the answer to this one. Today is another one of those words that is powerful in fundraising. It adds a sense of urgency. You want to be careful not to create, panic or a sense of doom and gloom, but you do want to be sure you're creating a sense of urgency in your fundraising. Another pair of possible wording for you. Your generosity will help these dogs, or thank you in advance for your generous support to help these dogs. Neither of them are bad because they do use the word you or your, but the word thank you is especially powerful. It's an expression of gratitude and it makes people feel valued. It's effective to use it in appeal letters and other fundraising letters or wording that you might be creating, as well as, of course, in your thank you notes. Here we go with another pair. Would you be willing to help by giving a donation? Or would you be willing to help by giving a donation? Every penny will help. So interestingly, when you ask people to donate with wording that indicates that even a small donation will make a difference, donors have been shown to be nearly twice as likely to donate. And this is because some donors feel that they can't make a huge donation, so what difference will it make? So if you can let them know that it will make a donation, and we have some other suggested wording on the slide for you that might be useful, It encourages people who cannot make huge contributions to still contribute. Now, if I was writing a letter to a high donor, I probably wouldn't include that. And we'll be talking a bit more about major gifts fundraising in just a few minutes. But in general, encouraging people that their gift matters and it makes a difference, even if it's not a lot of money, is a good practice. Your donation will be put to work immediately helping pets in need, or your donation helps pets in need. So both of these are good because they have the word your in it, but the one that includes the word immediately is important. Donors, as I mentioned, really want to know that their gift is going to make a difference, and they want it to make a speedy difference, not at some point in the future. So expressing immediacy, prompt action, quick impact, words like immediately, those are inspiring to many donors. And at the bottom, we have a sample of wording that you could use if for online donations, for example. It can be really quick to make an online donation. You want to be sure that process is easy, and reinforcing for people that it's quick and that the money will help right away can really encourage donors. So here we have a visual pairing for you. Which of these two online donation forms do you think will be more effective for the organization? Take a look at them and decide for yourself which you think would be more effective. Okay, so now, as you may have guessed, the one that suggests specific amounts is definitely more effective. And as you can see in the two samples we provided, the one that you just selected with a red 60 and the one below it, that has further highlighted a sort of average gift or a suggested gift. And it's been shown to increase the average donation by 12% when you suggest a gift amount. It's because as human beings, we feel more comfortable doing things the way we think other people are doing them. So sometimes when groups try to share in their fundraising that they are desperate for support and they don't have enough support, that can backfire. It's really that old adage, nothing succeeds like success. So it would be better to help people feel comfortable knowing that many other people are supporting this cause as well. So just before I hand things back to Diane, I want to cover a couple of more quick tips for you. And we've mentioned this a few times in this series, and it's about the power of telling a story. And always remember that donors give more when you have a story about an affected individual as opposed to something abstract or something about the overall scope of the problem, or even something that includes many animals. So focusing it on a story that personalizes it has a wonderful impact for donors. And pictures are so vital to your fundraising. It's really important to make sure someone on your team, be it a staff member, multiple staff members, or a volunteer, is out there working to get great photos. They are so essential to your success. That old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words, is still around because it's so true. When I worked at Best Friends, Stephen Hirano, who was one of the editors of the magazine, used to always say that he was looking for a photo that had the awe factor. And what he meant by that is people would see it and go, oh, that's so cute, or oh, so sweet. That was the reaction he wanted to get when he showed someone a photograph. And that's what guided his selection of photos for the magazine. So you can use that same test for your own photo selection. And one other magic piece of advice for fundraising is to be really specific. Making specific requests for life-saving equipment or supplies that you need can be incredibly impactful. And explaining, as we said, why the piece of equipment is needed and how much it costs can be just an amazing way to raise funds. It does work very well on social media, but it also works well for e-blasts you might be sending out to your donors. And just as asking for specific equipment helps, asking for specific funds for a particular animal to cover their veterinary care costs is also a very effective way where you are telling a story and asking, actually inviting people to participate in this life-saving effort by making a gift. And it's very powerful and effective way to fundraise. So with that, I think I turn things back over to Diane, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is correct. So next thing we're going to talk about is events. And we have found in our work that many groups overly rely on events. And this became really evident with the pandemic because there were obviously most events require gathering of people, and with the pandemic that limited the ability to be able to do that. So a lot of our clients or potential clients felt that they couldn't fundraise at all, since they were mostly planning events for the year. So we need to be sure that you're not relying, even without a pandemic, on events for most of the time. As you can see in the pie chart here again, that reddish pinkish color is the percentage of charitable funds that comes from events. So the blue again is individual donations. So that's where you really want to focus. It doesn't mean your events aren't important. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do them at all. And what we have found is that the pandemic has forced a lot of organizations to convert their events to virtual events. And those of you that have done the in-person ones in the past, which I have, and I'm sure we all can agree, they're extremely time consuming and labor intensive, and they don't always even make money. What I think a lot of organizations don't consider when they're even adding up their expenses and what their return is what the cost of the staff time that's working on them. But they are a way to build relationships with your supporters, and they should still be an important part of your fundraising plan, but just not the major crutch for it. And what we found with the groups that have converted their events to virtual events, that they, in many cases, have raised more money. They've reduced their expenses because they don't have the overhead, and often they've been able to broaden their audience. So a Gogo photo contest is one that we were able to use with our Options Veterinary Care Clinic recently, and other organizations throughout the country have done a mural contest through the Gogo photo website, where we had people submit photos of their pets, and then other people vote on them, and then the winners get to be in a mural, and in our case is being painted in the lobby of our clinic. But there have been organizations that have raised up to $50,000 doing it this way, and it's a very not labor intensive type activity, and we're happy to give you more information on that later if you think it's something you might like to try out. So one more poll here. It says, as we shift gears from events to major gifts, has your organization done major gifts fundraising? Yes, a little bit, no, or not usually, not sure, or not applicable. So only 5% says yes, 24 a little bit, and 43 no or not usually. So obviously this opens up a great opportunity to be able to focus on major gifts more. And we're going to give you a few tips here today, and give you a resource if you need more information on how to develop this part of your fundraising plan. So the first question is, where do you begin? You need to identify who your top 10 donors are. And it may be, in some cases, that number could vary depending on how many high-end donors you have, but it's a good place to start. And then just to dedicate time each week to cultivate the relationship with each of those particular donors. You want to block out specific time on your calendar and set that aside. Don't try to just decide you're going to do it if and when you get to it. It needs to be a planned effort. And you need to also be relaxed so that you are able to put your full attention to it. Because you're ultimately, like I said earlier, trying to build really sincere relationships with these people. And then make personal contact with at least one person on your list each week. Certainly you can do more if that's possible, but this is a good starting place. And as I mentioned earlier, what a high donor is really depends on your organization. I know at one point at Nevada Humane Society, when I was looking at our donors and trying to determine what was considered a high-end donor, we didn't have $5,000 donors, or not many anyway. So the lower end, it could be $100. But you want to just be sure you're focusing on what's high end for your organization. So not only are you cultivating that relationship so that they continue to give, but you're also cultivating it so that hopefully they will increase their giving over time. And when you call them, you just want to have a friendly conversation, and not necessarily to ask them for anything other than information. But again, this is just about developing the conversation. And there's some questions here you can ask. We have a handout that we're going to provide when we send the PDF of the presentation that gives you a script and some specific questions of how to handle these kinds of calls in case you're not comfortable with determining that on your own. And you don't want to just wing it, because you do want to get some real specific information, if possible, from them that will help you build that relationship and help you in your future contacts with these individuals. And again, just don't forget, this is not about asking them for money. One thing that's very helpful is to take notes when you ask the various questions, especially if you're looking at asking about their families, both the human and the pet families, being able to refer to those in the future, add that to the donor file. So if other people call, that they're able to also reference that information. It just makes people feel very special, very valued. And I don't know how many times we have heard back. We used to do what we called a thankathon, even not just for our top donors, but a lot of times they were leaving messages, and people would say how much they just appreciated getting the call, even if it was just a message. And when they weren't asking, or we weren't asking for anything, rather than just trying to see how they were doing and what they thought of the organization, and to get their ideas and feedback for how the organization could be more successful. And then after the call, it's really helpful to send some kind of personal follow-up, whether it's an email or an e-card or a regular card. You can do this if you're doing these calls at particular times of the year where there's a holiday. You can tie it into maybe Christmas or Valentine's Day or some other holiday that allows you to just send a card showing your appreciation and saying you enjoyed talking with them. It's just another way to keep in touch, and you want to continue to keep in touch. You can invite them for right now to be virtual behind the scenes tour. Pre and post pandemic, you can invite them in for an in-person tour. And then you can send and create special mailings that are just for these high-end donors. And maybe even you invite them, like I said, after the pandemic is hopefully over, out for a special chat over coffee or even lunch. So you want to not ask necessarily during these periodic contacts, but at some point in time when the opportunity is there and the situation is right, you might then be able to ask for something that fits with their specific needs and their interests, because you're really going to understand who they are and what does give them the joy, and what they're passionate about. Back in, I believe it was November, if I'm remembering correctly, we did a webinar that was just on end of the year fundraising, and you can certainly check out that presentation on our website. But the end of the year is extremely critical to focus on for fundraising. 31% of annual giving occurs in December alone. And some nonprofits say they bring in as much as 50% of their total income for the year during their end of the year asks. So don't forget to include special activities for the end of the year in your fundraising plan. And again, we can give you other specific ideas if you reach out to us, or if you would take the time to look at the end of the year fundraising presentation. There's a lot of really good specifics there. So Bonnie mentioned this quote, the first one here earlier, and fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. That really, to me, takes the pressure off of it, because you're really helping people do what they want to do, and you're helping make them joyful in being able to support something that they're passionate about. And again, the quote from Richard Avanzino, do good work, tell people about it, and ask them to help. So we hope you found some good tips here today that will help you with your fundraising activities and empowering your journey. Next week will be part 2 of this topic, and you'll learn how to increase public engagement with your organization to help you raise even more funds. So thank you for participating. I'm going to hand it over to Mark.
Okay, so now's the time for the Q&A portion. If you've got any questions, post them in the chat window. And if you want to, select, instead of them going to everyone, you can select me if you just prefer to have them sent to me directly. And so now the first question we've got from Martha, who asks, do you need to ask permission to email people if they give you their email address?
Well, my answer would be no. You can purchase mailing lists of people and mail them a letter without, their permission, and you can email people without their permission. I do think if you're enrolling them in like an e-newsletter that's going to come out every month, you want to be sure that the way to opt out is really clear so that you aren't annoying people. And once they've opted out, you'd want to be sure you don't re-add them, because that would create an annoyance with your organization. But no, you do not need, someone's permission to email them in my opinion. If anyone has a different opinion, it'd be great to hear about it in the chat.
Okay, so the next question is, what information about donors should you track?
Diane, do you want to respond, or do you want me to?
Sure, I can respond. So you want to, obviously, how much they give, when they give, how frequently they give, but this all could be in a database where you could pull out the information. It's a little more challenging if it's just in an Excel spreadsheet, but you probably have a limited number there, and so you could still probably sort. But you want to be able to be sure you know the amounts, but also the frequency, because somebody could give a small amount, but give it rather regularly, and it can add up. So, and of course, all of their contact information is important too. The other thing that a lot of organizations track, if they can, is what type of ask that did they give. So did they give online? Did they give for a particular appeal? Was it the spring appeal, the summer appeal? Was it an email appeal? So that you know how you are getting the donations from your different supporters. Bonnie, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and if you begin doing the donor cultivation work that Diane mentioned, so say you have virtual tours, or other ways that the person's participating, you want to ideally track all the ways that they're participating. If they're also a volunteer, if they're a clinic user, or if they perhaps attended an event. All of those things are things that you would ideally want to track. And if you're doing the cultivation of calling people, those notes that we talked about taking the call, those you'd want to capture them in the files. Ideally you have an electronic system that allows you to do that, but if you don't, you can always keep paper files on your top donors. And when Diane said identify your top donors, she's talking about looking at them over a period of time. I might tend to look at what donors gave in the past year and the year before that in order to see what are the trends, and not just who gave the largest amount in response to the last appeal. You'd want to look at their giving history over time. Fundraising can get incredibly sophisticated, and if you have the resources to invest in a high-end fundraising software program, it allows you to track things and look at things in a very sophisticated way. But considering that probably most people would be able to do what they need to do with a simpler one, something like Little Green Light is very cost effective and affordable and allows you to do a fair amount of what you need to do.
Okay, next question is, how can we get telephone numbers?
Um, Asking for them is best, but you can also do online research, especially if it's a high donor who's given to you. I would look online and try to find their phone number in order to reach out to people. Um, that's the best way. I know maybe someone else has a suggestion, but that would be what I would tend to do. If you have someone's email and not their phone number, you can email them and say, I'd really like to give you a quick call sometime. Would you be willing to share your number with me so we can talk? I'd love to hear more about why you support our work, or get your advice on our future direction. People love to give input and advice. So you can ask people for that, and just ask them for their phone number, worst case.
And don't forget that at all your events, or any time you're in contact with somebody, is to have the ability to request the information. We used to always, and no matter what event we were at or tabling, just have a sheet that allowed people to put their name, their physical address, their email, their phone number. Just be sure you have that made up, and that you include the phone number on those lists. Doesn't mean everybody will give it, but at least you have a better chance.
Right, and you can add it to your online donation form and use those opportunities to gather as much information as you can. I know, talking to people, that sometimes people feel like direct mail is dead, and I would say that is absolutely not true. We keep track of the pulse of fundraising in a nonprofit world at large, and it's still an important way to reach donors and to get donations. So you want to be sure you're getting those mailing addresses.
Okay, so now we have a question where the person asking it says, we have just hired a development person. My board expects to see instant profits. They don't seem to understand that even the non-fundraising activities she does will increase giving. Do you have any suggestions on how to explain to the board how to get them to understand the value of her time?
Yeah, I would be sure the board knew the whole fundraising plan, the overall fundraising strategy. It's important that boards understand how the resources are raised for the organization, and talk about donor cultivation and try to engage board members in it. I think having board members make thankathon calls is a great way for them to become engaged in fundraising, and to understand that fundraising is about relationships and that it takes time to cultivate them. That said, there are some things you can do that can raise money fairly quickly. And if that is a need, there are fundraising strategies that address even, crisis fundraising is a thing. So, there's research online. We're happy to talk with groups. We have talked with groups about crisis fundraising before and helped a couple of them do that. So there are strategies you can use to bring in funds quickly, but it's important that tends, you know, the goal, of course, is to build sustainable fundraising. And it does take time, but I would try to develop a fundraising plan that had a balance of both, some quick hits, ways to bring in money pretty quickly, and the ongoing effort of sustaining, building a sustainable donor base, basically.
Okay. Next question is, when you say direct mail, are you talking about existing relationships or purchased lists of new people?
Um, well, your own list is going to get the best return for you. So people who've had a contact with you, as Diane was saying about the multiple impressions that we need to make to get a response from people. And so people who already know you are much more likely to make a donation than those who do not already have a relationship with your organization. So your own list would be best, but it is possible, and people do engage in prospect mailing, where you work with a mailing house that has access to mailing lists. They can find people who are good donor prospects, and you can do prospect mailings. The percentage of return is not that high. However, organizations do it. So in the long run, there's got to be a payoff there. I wouldn't recommend it for a small organization. I think it would be much better if you had limited resources to focus on cultivating the donors you have and expanding those donors, getting new donors. And we'll talk about that next week, because everything you do that gets you known out there in the community, especially those very specific asks, and especially for animal health issues, for treating animals that need costly treatment, you can get sometimes media attention, and you can definitely attract new donors. Richard Avanzino's thing is so elegant in that he says, do good work, tell people about it, and ask them to help. And that doing good work part is really an essential component of it. The first 4 of our sessions were talking about that. Now we've moved into the tell people about it, ask them to help part. But again, we're always happy to talk with you if you need help in strategizing. Diane may have something to add to that.
No, I think you covered it well.
Okay. How do you decide who gets a special email or letter that everyone is not getting on your list? Is there like a percentage of your budget or some other criteria?
Diane, do you
I'm
want
not
to talk
sure,
about it?
yeah, I'm not sure what they mean by percentage of budget, but when I talked about looking at your top donors, however you define those, and that is what you would use possibly to do something extra special for them, and to cultivate them at a different level. So again, it's going to depend on your particular donor situation. And in some cases, it could be, like I mentioned earlier, people that give over $100, or it could be $5,000. So well, however you keep track of your donations, sort them, the highest at the top, and just take a look at, analyze where the big hitters are. And it may change over time. You may decide that you want to expand that list as you have more people that can help you with the cultivation activities. But it's really not a formula so much as being able to do what makes sense for your particular organization. And it could change over time too. Hopefully, as you're doing more and more fundraising, your funds are going to change as far as what's coming in, and the number of people are going to change, and those levels are going to change.
Yeah, and the one thing I would add to that is that you can cultivate donors in the middle too. And getting donors to move from an annual or, semi-annual donation to maybe a monthly sponsorship type donation program where they're giving every month is another effort you can make that doesn't have to be focused on the highest donors. So, you can keep developing. It isn't limited to that. You can keep finding ways to cultivate donors and move all the donors up in terms of what they give on an annual basis.
Okay, well, that does it for this session. If you didn't get a chance to, ask your question or you think of one later, just email us at the email address on the screen there. It's info@humanenetwork.org. On Friday, I will send a recording link, and we'll also, send copies of the PowerPoint presentation after the final session, which is a week from today. And that session is part 2 of Power Your Journey, that'll focus on how to increase public engagement to support fundraising efforts. And this webinar series was supported by the Petco Foundation and presented by Humane Network. If you'd like to be notified of future webinars, be sure to sign up for the Shelter Success Simplified e-newsletter at the bottom of our website at humanenetwork.org. And so thank you so much for all of the work you do helping animals.
And please note on the slide that's up there that the Petco Foundation is creating a national lost and found database for pets. So you can learn more and join that initiative by visiting petcofoundation.org/lostpets. So thank you again for joining us. Hopefully you got some information that will be helpful in creating your own fundraising plans and creating more sustained donors in the future.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening, everybody.